You know California for its white sandy beaches, for its cities that shine like jewels beneath the Pacific, for the dreams manufactured in Hollywood and sold to the entire world. But there is another California, one that nobody promotes, one that modern maps have preferred to erase, scattered across endless deserts, buried in mountain passes where the wind never stops, sinking into valleys that time forgot. There are towns that once promised fortune, a future, and a new life. Towns that today are nothing more than dust and silence. In this video, you will discover 13 ghost towns in California that Google Maps doesn't want to show you. Places where history was frozen in time, where the walls still remember what their inhabitants prefer to forget and stay until the end. And because the number one on this list lies at the center of an environmental disaster so vast, so seemingly deliberate, that some believe the government let it happen on purpose. Number 13. Llano del Rio. In the scorched plains of Antelope Valley, just over 60 miles north of Los Angeles, lays the corpse of a utopia. Today you will find very little: crumbling stone foundations, a few walls that still refuse to fall, as if waiting for someone to come back and inhabit them. The desert wind batters them without mercy. But just over a century ago, this place was going to be paradise. Llano del Rio was founded in 1914 by a socialist lawyer named Job Harriman. He had lost the Los Angeles mayoral election, and instead of giving up, he decided to build his own version of the ideal world. A cooperative colony where workers shared everything: the land, the labor, the profits. In less than 2 years, more than 1,000 people lived in Llano. They built hotels, a printing press, a cannery, a rabbit farm, even their own socialist newspaper. Children went to school while their parents worked the alfalfa fields. For one fleeting moment, the dream seemed real. But the desert has its own rules. Disputes over water rights tore the colony apart. The wells could not sustain so many people. Internal conflicts over leadership finished it off. By 1918, just 4 years after its founding, Llano del Rio was empty. The colonists packed their bags and moved to Louisiana to try again. Today, the site sits on private land, near the intersection of two desert highways. If you stop and walk through the brush, you will find the old stone assembly hall, its arches still intact, framing nothing but empty sky. Rusted pipes jut from the sand where gardens once grew. It is one of the few socialist utopian experiments in American history to leave physical ruins, a monument to idealism crushed by reality in the heart of the California desert. Number 12. Panamint City. In the Panamint Mountains, wedged into a narrow canyon above Death Valley, lie the remains of one of the wildest silver towns California has ever known. Getting there today requires crossing miles of dirt roads that most vehicles cannot handle. But in 1873, 3 outlaws fleeing the law stumbled upon one of the richest silver deposits in the state, and everything changed overnight. Within months, Panamint City exploded. More than 2,000 people crammed into Surprise Canyon, building houses, saloons, and businesses on the mountain slopes. The main street was so narrow that pack mules could barely squeeze through. Outlaws, gamblers, and gunfighters poured in. The town became so dangerous that Wells Fargo refused to operate there. Robberies were constant. The mine owners found a brutal solution. They smelted the silver into 400-pound cannonballs, too heavy for any bandit to carry off. For 2 frantic years, Panamint City roared. But in 1876, a flash flood swept through the canyon in a single night, destroying most of the town. The silver veins had thinned anyway. By 1877, Panamint City was empty. Today, hikers who dare the difficult trek into the canyon find a disturbing landscape. Stone foundations cling to the slopes. An enormous brick smokestack from the old smelter still stands. Mine tunnels plunge into the mountain with no visible bottom. The isolation has preserved something most ghost towns lost long ago: silence, a complete and total silence. broken only by the wind between the canyon walls. Number 11. Drawbridge. This place breaks all the rules. It is not in the desert, it is not in the mountains. It sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by marshes and water. And it is completely inaccessible without special permission. Drawbridge is the last true ghost town in California that you literally cannot visit. The town began in the 1870s as a hunting retreat for wealthy San Franciscans who came to shoot ducks in the wetlands. Over time, workers and fishermen settled there. By the early 20th century, Drawbridge had hotels, hunting lodges, and a small permanent population. The weekend visitors arrived by train to escape the city. It was remote but alive. Then came the decline. The wetlands were drained for salt production. Duck populations collapsed. The bay became polluted. Rail service was cut back. One by one, the buildings emptied. The last resident left in 1979. What makes Drawbridge so mysterious is that it still exists, but no one can reach it. The buildings are rotting in the marsh, surrounded by protected nature reserve land. The only way to see it is by kayak at high tide, and even then, landing is illegal. Aerial photographs show houses collapsing in slow motion, tilting into the mud, their windows dark like blind eyes. The railroad tracks still run past the town. If you travel on Amtrak between San Jose and Oakland, you can see the buildings from the train window. That most passengers have no idea what they are looking at. Number 10. Cerro Gordo. At 8,500 feet in the Inyo Mountains, overlooking the infinite emptiness of Owens Valley, Cerro Gordo was once the richest silver mine in California. The ore extracted from these mountains built Los Angeles. That is not an exaggeration. In the early 1870s, the silver and lead from Cerro Gordo financed the expansion of a small town called Los Angeles and transformed it into a real city. Mule trains hauled millions of dollars in bullion down the mountain to the steamboats waiting on Owens Lake. At its peak, the town had more than 1,000 residents and dozens of buildings stacked on the steep mountain slope. But the silver eventually ran out. By the 1880s, most of the miners had left. Cerro Gordo went through attempts to revive zinc mining, but none succeeded. For decades, the town sat empty, watched over by caretakers who prevented the buildings from collapsing entirely. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 2018, a group of investors purchased Cerro Gordo with plans to restore it. They have documented the process online, uncovering artifacts, restoring buildings, even surviving a fire that destroyed the historic hotel. The town now exists in a strange middle ground, not entirely abandoned, not entirely alive. Visitors can spend the night in the original miners' cabins and walk streets that have not changed in 100 years. Number 9. Ballarat. On the western edge of Death Valley, where the Panamint Mountains dissolve into the desert floor, a handful of buildings bake under a merciless sun. This is Ballarat, a town that refuses to die entirely. The Ballarat was founded in 1897 to supply the miners working in the canyons above. It had a population of several hundred, a school, a post office, multiple saloons, and a Wells Fargo branch. It was the gateway to Panamint City and the other mining camps in the mountains. For a few years, money flowed through Ballarat like water in a desert stream, but the mines began to fail. The camps emptied one by one. Without miners to supply, Ballarat had no purpose. By the 1920s, nearly everyone had gone. What makes Ballarat peculiar is that there has almost always been someone living there. Caretakers have occupied the town intermittently for decades, maintaining the remaining buildings and receiving the occasional visitor. A small general store operated until recently. The current resident watches over the old jail, the adobe ruins, and the cemetery where prospectors rest beneath hand-carved wooden crosses. Ballarat also has a darker connection to history. For much of the 20th century, the area served as a hideout for criminals and outcasts. That reputation still hovers over the place like the heat haze distorting the horizon, adding an unsettling edge to a place that is already eerie enough. Number 8. Bodie. No list of California ghost towns would be complete without Bodhi. But most people do not understand just how well preserved this place is, nor how strange it feels to walk through a town frozen in time. Bodhi sits at over 8,000 feet in the eastern Sierra Nevada, surrounded by sagebrush and battered by brutal winters. Gold was discovered here in 1859, but the real boom came in the 1870s when rich deposits drew thousands of people. At its peak, that Bodhi had nearly 10,000 residents, 65 saloons, and a reputation as one of the most violent towns in the West. Murders were so common that the phrase "bad man from Bodhi" entered the local vocabulary. It is said that children in the town received letters from relatives in other cities that began with the words, "Please do not let my son become a bad man from Bodhi." The gold did not last. By the 1880s, Bodhi was in decline. Fires destroyed much of the town. The last residents left in the 1940s. What makes Bodhi extraordinary is what happened next. Nothing. The state declared it a historic park preserved in a state of arrested decay. The buildings have not been restored. They have simply been prevented from collapsing. Walk through Bodhi today and you will see plates still on the tables, merchandise on store shelves, coffins in the undertakers, pool balls in position, waiting for a game that will never begin. It is as if everyone simply got up one afternoon and never came back. Rangers patrol the streets to prevent theft, but the real protection comes from a legend. Visitors who take something from Bodhi, even a single rusted nail, claim to be cursed with terrible bad luck. The park receives packages every year from people returning stolen objects, along with letters describing the misfortunes that followed. Number 7. Calico. Calico rises from the Mojave Desert like a feverish dream. It is simultaneously a ghost town and something else entirely. The original town was founded in 1881 following a massive silver strike in the surrounding hills. Within 5 years, Calico had more than 500 mines, a population of 1,200, and all the violence one would expect from a booming desert town. Silver poured out of the mountains in torrents. Fortunes were made and lost in a single hand of cards. The hills themselves are stained red, orange, and brown, which gave the town its name. But when silver prices collapsed in the 1890s, Calico fell apart almost overnight. The mines closed, the people vanished, the buildings rotted under the desert sun for decades. In the 1950s, a businessman bought the town and began restoring it as a tourist attraction. He rebuilt many structures, added some that had never existed, and eventually donated the town to San Bernardino County. Today, Calico operates as a county regional park, complete with gift shops, train rides, and staged gunfighter duels. But here is what most visitors never see. Behind the tourist attractions, the original mines still honeycomb the hills with metal and darkness. If you explore the hiking trails around Calico, you will find tunnels, abandoned equipment, and foundations that have nothing to do with the reconstructed main street. The real ghost town hides in plain sight, overshadowed by its own commercialized version. Number 6. Darwin. At the end of a lonely desert road between Death Valley and the Sierra Nevada, there is Darwin, a town that technically still has residents but feels completely abandoned. Perhaps 20 people live here today, scattered among crumbling buildings and rusted mining machinery. There is no store, no gas station, no services of any kind, just silence and heat, and the feeling that you have driven to the edge of the map and fallen off it. Darwin was founded in 1874 when silver was discovered in the nearby Argus Range. The town briefly flourished, reaching a population of over 1,000, then collapsed when the ore ran out. It went through cycles of activity and abandonment over the next century, never quite dying, but never truly living either. Lead and zinc mining kept some families employed during the World Wars. By the 1970s, Darwin had become something else. Artists, hermits, and people fleeing conventional life began drifting in. They occupied the abandoned buildings and created a strange community of outcasts living among the ruins. That culture persists today. the remaining residents are fiercely protective of their isolation. Visitors are tolerated but not welcomed. Signs warn against trespassing. Some buildings are inhabited, others are collapsing. And it is not always clear which is which. Walking through Darwin feels like interrupting a secret society that has chosen to live in the past. Number 5. Skidoo. High in the Panamint Mountains above Death Valley, the remains of Skidoo are scattered across a wind-lashed hillside. Getting there requires a long drive over rough dirt roads. But the isolation is part of what makes this ghost town so unsettling. Skidoo was born in 1906 when gold was discovered at nearly 6,500 feet of elevation. The name came from the popular slang of the era, and it was fitting. The town was located 23 miles from the nearest water source. That distance should have killed the town before it started. But the miners solved the problem by building a 23-mile pipeline from Telescope Peak, one of the longest in Death Valley history. At its peak, Skidoo had more than 700 residents, a newspaper, a bank, and all the businesses a mining town required. But the most famous event in Skidoo's history was a hanging. In 1908, a man killed a much-loved bartender during a drunken dispute. The town did not wait for a trial. A mob dragged him from the jail and hanged him from a telephone pole. According to local legend, the body was cut down and then hanged again the next day, so a reporter who arrived late could photograph it. Some accounts claim the body was hanged a third time for another photographer. Whether the story is entirely true is a matter of debate, but it cemented Skidoo's reputation as a place of brutal justice. The gold ran out by 1917, and the town emptied quickly. Today, scattered foundations and debris mark where buildings once stood. The pipeline disappeared long ago. Some mine shafts plunge into the mountain slope toward the darkness. Number 4. Randsburg. Randsburg is a ghost town that refuses to admit it is dead. This small mining community in the western Mojave still has around 70 residents, a working post office, and even a bar that serves drinks on weekends. But walk down the main street and you will see more abandoned buildings than occupied ones. It exists in a strange twilight between ghost town and living village. Gold was discovered here in 1895, triggering a rush that brought thousands to these arid hills. Randsburg, along with the neighboring towns of Johannesburg and Red Mountain, formed a mining district that produced millions in gold, silver, and tungsten over the following decades. Unlike most ghost towns, Randsburg never emptied completely. A small population held on through every downturn, waiting for the next boom that sometimes came and sometimes did not. What makes Randsburg worth visiting is its brutal authenticity. The general store has operated continuously since 1896. The saloon still serves drinks in a building that has not fundamentally changed in over a century. The streets are unpaved. The buildings are original. Nothing has been rebuilt or sanitized for tourists. Walking through Randsburg is like walking through what Bodie might have been if people still lived there. Number 3. Harrisburg. Deep in Death Valley, in one of the most remote corners of the most extreme desert in North America, lie the scattered remains of Harrisburg. Getting there requires a high-clearance vehicle and the willingness to drive miles into absolute nothingness. And most Death Valley visitors never come close to this place. Harrisburg was founded around 1906 by a prospector named Shorty Harris, one of the most colorful characters in Death Valley history. Harris had a habit of discovering valuable properties and then selling them too cheaply or losing them to shrewder businessmen. He found gold here and named the town after himself. But true to form, he never got rich from it. The town grew to a few hundred people, with the usual collection of tents, shacks, and mining operations. The settlement lasted only a few years before the ore ran out. By 1915, Harrisburg was abandoned. What remains today is remarkably intact, given its age and location. Stone walls, wooden beams, and scattered artifacts lie exactly where they were left more than a century ago. The extreme aridity of Death Valley has preserved things that would have rotted anywhere else. Rusted cans still stacked, glass bottles catching the desert light. Shorty Harris died in 1934, and was buried in Death Valley, fulfilling his wish to rest forever in the desert he loved. His gravestone is one of the few signs that anyone ever called this merciless landscape home. Number 2. Masonic. Hidden in the mountains above Bridgeport, reached by a dirt road that becomes impassable in winter, the remains of Masonic cling to a steep hillside surrounded by forest. This ghost town does not appear in most travel guides. It is not marked on most maps, but what survives here is extraordinary. Masonic was founded around 1902 when gold was discovered in these remote hills. The town grew quickly. It perched on terrain so steep that some buildings were constructed on stilts to stay level. At its peak, several hundred miners and their families lived here, enduring brutal winters at over 8,000 feet of elevation. The mines produced gold steadily for several years. A small commercial district served the community, but the deposits were not deep. By 1911, the mines were struggling. A fire in 1909 had already destroyed part of the town. When the stamp mills finally fell silent, Masonic emptied within months. Today, Masonic is considered one of the best preserved ghost towns in California. Several cabins still stand, their aged logs weathered to a silver gray. The remains of the stamp mill rust silently in a meadow. Mining equipment lies scattered across the hillside. Because the road is so difficult and the location so remote, fewer visitors reach Masonic than almost any other ghost town in the state. Those who make the journey find something increasingly rare, a place that feels genuinely forgotten. If you made it this far, you already know what it means. Number 1 changes everything. Number 1, Bombay Beach. On the eastern shore of the Salton Sea, there's a place so apocalyptic it barely seems like California. This is Bombay Beach, and what surrounds you when you arrive defies all explanation. The Salton Sea was an accident. In 1905, irrigation canals broke and began flooding a desert basin for 2 straight years, creating California's largest lake in the middle of nowhere. For decades, it was promoted as a resort paradise. Bombay Beach had vacation homes, yacht clubs, and famous visitors. It was the California dream transplanted to the desert. So then everything collapsed. The sea has no outlet. Salinity kept rising year after year. Fish died by the millions. The stench drove away tourists. Rising waters flooded entire neighborhoods. Today, fewer than 300 people remain. They live among ruins. Abandoned trailers rot under the sun. The beach is not covered in sand but in the crushed bones of dead fish. The horizon over the water is milky white, thick with salt and death. But this is where the story turns truly dark. Scientists warned for decades that the Salton Sea was dying. Restoration plans were drafted, budgets were proposed, promises were made. None of it happened. The sea continues to shrink, exposing a toxic lakebed whose dust now blows into nearby communities, causing respiratory disease in children. Some local residents believe the state deliberately let the sea die, sacrificing it to send water to wealthier coastal cities. Others point to agricultural interests that needed the basin as a dump for runoff water. The truth lies buried in decades of water politics that few people fully understand. And yet, something unexpected has emerged from the collapse. Artists discovered Bombay Beach. Sculptures rise from the salt flats. Murals cover the abandoned buildings. An annual festival brings visitors to this apocalyptic shore. Walking through Bombay Beach feels like witnessing the end of the world and the beginning of something new at the same time. It is a ghost town that is not entirely dead. An environmental crime scene turned artist colony. A broken mirror reflecting what California could become if greed and neglect keep winning. The closing 13 towns, 13 stories of ambition, failure, and forgetting. From the socialist utopia the desert swallowed, to the artificial paradise that man himself destroyed, from the mines where silver was worth more than a human life, to the swamp where an entire city sank while no one lifted a finger to save it. California keeps selling itself as the state of dreams, and maybe it is, but dreams also leave ruins behind. Next time you're on a California highway, staring out at that endless golden landscape, ask yourself what else is out there. beyond the road sign, beyond the last gas station, beyond the edge of the map, because California has more secrets than it will ever tell you.